What's up guys, we're going to be talking about modules in coding. The idea behind modular programming is that we break down our code into separate files. If we think about any piece of code, whether it's a web app or some type of software that runs on the desktop, if we wanted to, we could actually put the whole thing in a single file. So right now we could write an entire app in this one javascript.js file. There are some problems with that, however, and one of those problems is when it comes to making updates to the code, it's going to be very difficult to find what we're looking for. And also we may find that if we try and update a small part of the code, we could end up breaking the entire app. So if we were to put everything in one file, it would be really difficult to maintain and update the app, especially without running the risk of breaking everything by missing a semicolon in our giant code document. Now, all programming languages support the idea of modules. It's really the idea that we can bring in code from an external file. And we'll have a look at how this works in JavaScript. Now, let's pretend that we have a function. And we'll just call it hello. And this is going to console log a representation of something really advanced. So some really advanced function. And the idea is we can see this is just 2 or 3 lines of code, but imagine that this was actually 1,000 lines of code. It's a module that we want as part of our app. Now let's just start by calling our function and making sure everything works. So if everything's okay, it should just console log out some really advanced function to the output. Now let's pretend that our app has many different functions like this, and inside each function we have a large amount of logic. Well, this document's going to get very large, it's going to get very convoluted. So what we'd ideally do is store our functions in a different document and import them into the main document. So to do that, let's create a new file and we'll call it myscripts.js. And you may even store a selection of grouped scripts that perform similar functions in a single document. We could actually import them all at once. Let's have a look at how this is going to work in JavaScript. So we'll call our document myscripts.js, and we're simply going to copy over our function into myscripts.js. We've actually cut and pasted that, so we've removed it from the original document. Of course, the original document is not going to be able to execute correctly because it doesn't have that function defined anymore. It's defined in myscripts.js. So we need to find a way of exporting the function from myscripts.js. Now don't worry too much about the syntax. We're going to be making use of a command called module.exports equals hello. And we're basically telling JavaScript that this file is a module and we want this module to export this function hello. So our next step is to import this function into the main JavaScript file. And we can say const hello equals require, and we're going to describe the location of the scripts file. So it's going to be our current location, which we can indicate with a dot / myscripts.js. So we've defined a new constant, we're calling it hello, which is the same name as the function. And it's going to extract that from myscripts.js. How does it know what to extract from myscripts.js? Well, because of this statement, it knows that it's exporting hello in this case. Okay, let's run this. Let's see what we get. So you can see we get the output here, some really advanced function. Now, seeing as the export is already defined in myscripts.js, this doesn't have to be called hello. So let's just call it advanced instead. And then we will execute the advanced function. Let's run that again. We get the same output. So we're just calling it hello for simplicity's sake because it's the same name as the function that's defined in myscripts.js. So the code's a bit cleaner that way. But technically we can define this constant with any name that we want to, because based on this module.export statement, JavaScript knows what it's pulling into the main file here. Now don't worry too much about the syntax. There are better ways of doing this in JavaScript, making use of something known as ECMA6 script. There's a more convenient way of writing imports using JavaScript, but that's not the point here. We're not focusing on the syntax, we're focusing on the idea that we can write modular code in external files then we can import them into a main document. This helps with updating and maintainability of apps, because let's say I want to work on a specific feature of my application, then it's likely that that feature has its own module, so I can jump straight to the code and work on it in an isolated way where every change I make applies specifically to this part of the app. There's no danger of me accidentally deleting something from the main JavaScript file. So safer and easier. Now in this case, we wrote our own module and we're pretending that it has some kind of advanced functionality, but in many cases we won't always write our own modules. There are generally, depending on the program language, a large amount of modules written by other developers that are free to import and use in your application. And one of the easiest ways to access these external modules is via what's known as a package manager. For example, JavaScript has the Node package manager, and something like PHP has Composer, which is also a package manager. So let's get a feel for how this works. Let's return to our main JavaScript file. We're no longer going to import from myscripts.js. And let's head to the terminal. Now this is in PowerShell. A lot of the time you'll be working with a bash shell, i.e. Linux, but we'll be doing this in PowerShell right now. And the command to initialize a directory that can pull in modules from Node Package Manager is npm init. So let's run that command. Let's see what we get in our output here. And it's asking us for initial configuration options for the app that we are building, or the package. So we'll give it a name, we'll call it my app, and for the other values, we'll just leave default values. So we'll just leave version and description blank. Doesn't matter too much since this isn't going to be a full app. You can even specify the Git repo here and some keywords, author, license. It says, is this okay? Just to summarize our configuration, we'll just choose yes. And we'll notice, if you look on the left, that in our directory, we now have a package.json file. And we can actually just have a look at the contents of that. In fact, we can open it in our code editor. And what this file does is it lists all of the packages that our application depends on, in particular the packages that are available through Node Package Manager. Now, just to give an example of this, let's install a package using Node Package Manager. And to do that, we're going to type npm install, and the name of the package I'm going to grab is called Luxon. It's a JavaScript library, or module if you prefer, that helps us work with times and dates. So let's run npm install Luxon. It's downloaded the package. Now if you have a look in the package.json file, we have an extra section here which says dependencies, and we see one of our dependencies is Luxon, and we have a version number there as well. Also, if we take another look in our directory, we now see a folder that is entitled Node Modules. And if we expand that folder, we'll see all of the source code, or the JavaScript files, for the packages that we've installed. So if we take a look at Luxon, we'll see a bunch of JavaScript files. This is essentially our module, which we can now import into the main document. So the advantage of this is that there are modules that handle day-to-day tasks. For example, this is an upgrade over the vanilla way of handling times and dates in JavaScript. Now, of course, as a developer, you could spend your time writing your own package to do this, but seeing as there's already a package out there that's very efficient at doing this, it's much easier to just import the already written module using Node Package Manager. And the way that we're going to import this right now using node.js or JavaScript, very similar to what we did before. We're going to say const. The only thing is we're going to wrap this in curly brackets to indicate that it's an object. And we're going to say equals require Luxon. And just to check that it's imported correctly, we can even console log out the imported object. So we can say console log, and we're just going to pass in date time here. And let's see what we get. So you can see we get function datetime. Now that doesn't guarantee everything's working correctly, so let's just use this the way that it's supposed to be used. So according to the documentation, we can do something like const dt, standing for datetime, equals datetime.now. So we're calling the .now method. And let's then console log out the value of dt. See what we get. So you can see we get a datetime object with all of the information regarding the current date. And I believe we can also use a toString method on that object. So if we do something like dt toString, console log that out, let's see what we get. We get a string indicating the current date. Now, once again, the objective here is not to know how to use any specific package. We're not here to learn how to use the Luxon JavaScript library. The key concept here is that we were able to import a module written by a third party making use of a package manager. And the vast majority of programming languages have a package manager where we can easily import modules written by other developers to help us build our application faster. And if you have a look at any sizable Node.js app, you'll often see there are quite a range of dependencies listed inside the package.json file. So this is something that's commonly done. By making use of existing modules or packages, we can quickly scale up our application without having to reinvent the wheel every time with basic functionality like a datetime library, for example.